Well, it looks like we've got a lot of things to think about as we head into next year. And there's no way I think any of us are speaking definitely and definitively about hybrid yet, in the way that I've felt quite comfortable doing that over the last few months with virtual. And I think you guys are probably the same. You feel a bit more confident to say stuff about virtual, but hybrid, who knows what it will bring. But one thing for sure, 2021 will be just as much of a challenge as 2020 has been for us all. We're here and we're going to talk about hybrid and how that's going to lead us into 2021. And the first question that I wanted to ask, Mike, I'll ask you first, is what does hybrid mean to you? And if you're having these conversations with staff, stakeholders, attendees, what will this hybrid environment mean to you next year?
So I think from our perspective, we went ahead with our first ever hybrid event in October of this year, and it took place in Warsaw, where I'm actually sat here at the moment in obviously Poland. So I think looking forward to 2021, you're going to see a lot. I think nearly every single event is going to choose to host their physical gathering as a hybrid, with a hybrid component to it. It just makes. To me, it makes so much sense, and I believe most event organisers actually will feel the same. You vastly increase the reach of your event. It's a lot more accessible, and you can have different price points for the virtual attendees and the physical attendees. This is how our hybrid looked 2 months ago. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, you only have to hum the tune.
No, you missed me. I was singing karaoke at the networking events. So. But there was such energy from the attendees. It was like straight out of prison, and they were just rushing to be meeting with other people, and a real nice buzz around the place.
That's great.
In terms of size compared to the equivalent event the year before, it was around 20% of the turnout, but to be expected. There was less international guests arriving, but again, most of the international guests joined virtually on Hopin.
So could you have had more people in the physical space, or was that you kind of sold out with the minimum numbers that you were obviously able to have at that time?
No, we could have certainly had about 3 times more the number of physical attendees. So all in all, there was around 300 people at the physical venue and around 800 people on Hopin. But it was, the venue's really huge. We have like 5,000 square meters. So, it felt a little bit empty, but also at the same time, some people probably felt a lot more comfortable with such a huge amount of space.
Brilliant. That's great. Is this your definition of a hybrid event, this physical audience and this virtual audience? Is that where you're sticking in terms of the definition?
So it was our first ever hybrid, and obviously we had a lot of lessons learned from that event. And what we're actually doing it again in March, at the end of March next year. So the lessons that we learn for the next event is to really try and increase the engagement between the virtual attendees and the physical attendees. I have some of the closer delegates that I know personally. They were WhatsApping me, asking for a video tour of the venue to see what was happening. There was almost that sense of, oh, we're missing out because we're not there. So I think anything event organisers can do to sort of remedy that and really create a welcoming experience for the virtual attendees as well as the physical people would be good.
Iris, welcome. That was almost a video of what you almost had in Iceland in September, wasn't it? Because you were very close. Mm-hmm. The plan was always to have this hybrid, but it didn't quite materialise like that. Do you wish you would have, looking at that video that Mike's shared? Is that really what you wanted to have, or were you happy with how successful your virtual event was?
There are so many changes that we've been learning so much this year, and if I can answer, in that way, what hybrid means to me now, it has a whole new meaning to me than it did a year ago. Now I find it, really excited and modern, and there's loads of opportunities now. I mean, in charts, what you were mentioning when the pandemic started, in March, April, we decided to look at doing the physical event that we always do in September, to start to look at doing it, virtual. But then soon, or a couple of months later, we decided to go in for it only virtual. So it was quite of a challenge. But I remember watching, a video which looked similar to the event that Mike was showing us. But we didn't go that way this year, but we are looking at a hybrid version next October, which might maybe come closer to what you were showing us here.
And Ross, how did your hybrid event go?
A full day conference. We had 160 people in the end in Singapore for the physical event. And part of that was broadcast onto Hopin. So we had two agendas. One agenda was the Singapore event. It was basically a normal conference of panels and speakers. On Hopin, we were broadcasting some parts of Singapore in, but for the parts that we thought were not relevant to a more international audience, we were just playing pre-recorded content on the main stage. And so what actually happened is, as a Hopin attendee, you were getting some live broadcasts from Singapore, plus you were getting some really diverse, interesting, pre-recorded, high-quality content throughout the day on Hopin. It worked really well, but it was also very, very stressful, if I'm honest with you, because the safety management measures in place for Singapore to host a physical event were extraordinarily restrictive. And so for us to host that 160 person event, it really was a minefield. We were having to negotiate every half hour with the Singapore government on site to make sure we were following the safety measurement plan. So it was logistically a real nightmare on site. Hopin was a breeze. Hopin ran like a breeze. We just had content streamed. Coming back to our earlier observations, when you have pre-recorded content on Hopin, on-site, on-day, on experience in Hopin for an event organizer is flawless. There's no pressure. Everything's taken care of. There's nothing that can go wrong. You're just playing a stream and you're engaging your audience online. The intertwining of a physical event under safe distancing is very, very challenging.
How did it feel did it feel like you'd run two different events, or just one event with a little bit of an add-on? And I mean, not just the kind of stressful, but actually how much effort that you'd put into it.
So it's an interesting one, William. It was almost because I was there at the venue, obviously, you don't really get a feel for how, because you're not walking around with your laptop watching the online part. So it almost, in some ways, you could say it's like two events in one. But in a lot of ways, I think that as long as you don't try and get too creative with the agenda, as in having multiple agendas across the online segment and the live segment, I'd advise any first-time hybrid organisers to keep it as streamlined as possible, and then you should avoid any hiccups. In terms of.
Do you mean the same when you say streamlined? Do you mean the same for the live as for the virtual audience?
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, what we did, we had 5 different stages on Hopin, and we had at times between 3 to 5 live stages at the Palace. So simply all we would do is take the camera feed from the live stage and put it onto its dedicated Hopin stage. So next event will be, experimenting and dabbling with, certain improvements we can make and trying out new schemes. But I think really for the first event, definitely sticking to a known playbook is the way to go.
Was it priced differently?
So we typically our event is focused on connecting startups with investors. So we had a model whereby all of the virtual startups, they would apply free of charge, and if they were approved to attend, they came online free of charge. And we had, I believe, 900 startups, across the 2 days virtually. In terms of the physical attendance, every type of ticket class was a paid option. So even startups that came to Warsaw, they would pay for their ticket. And this was a whole new angle that we approached, because prior to COVID, the startups would attend free of charge. So it seemed to work really well. It was, we felt it didn't detract from the quality of the event for the startups, because still they could attend virtually. So that gave us the critical mass that we need.
Yeah, our delegate tickets for online were between $99 and $199, and our delegate tickets for the physical event were about $495. What was quite interesting, however, was that our sponsorship revenue for it online was much greater than the physical event. And the reason why, because we had limitations on numbers at the physical event. And so sponsors wanted to put the money into the online event rather than actually have money into the physical event, which is quite interesting.
That is really interesting from that perspective, definitely. Quite a big jump. I wonder what people are thinking in terms of 99. Or you said 99 up to 199 and then 495 for the physical. Yeah. So double and a bit more for the physical event. That's round about, I think my advice at the start of this pandemic was round about 2.5 to 3 times if you were doing physical to virtual. So I think you're round about there. So that's quite interesting. Iris, as you look ahead to next year and you're starting to think about a hybrid format, can you picture it yet? Or is it still quite kind of hazy in terms of how you're going to have the event in Reykjavik and then have this virtual element as well?
It's still quite hazy. I mean, we have 10 months ahead of us, but we are going to go full force, and we will be launching a virtual event in the US. We will have a charts week in the end of March. So we are going into a new market with a virtual event. So we will be in the US March, and then we are going to look at the Oceania a few months later, and then we will have the hybrid event in October. And I understand, and we thought a bit about having a hybrid event this year, and to me, I find it's very interesting to see how well those guys have been able to do it. I mean, it's all, we always need to have a very good platform. I think that's one of the main things that we have to have in order to have everything being successful, and how you're going to involve, both on site and those attending virtual, how they can participate in the questions and answers. How did that go very smoothly with you guys, Mike and Russ?
What we had around 50 matchmaking tables, physical tables at the Palace in Warsaw. And basically the algorithm inside our system, if one of the parties was marked as a virtual attendee, then the meeting would revert to a virtual meeting. So what we had was lots of different individuals sat with their laptop having a virtual meeting from the physical venue, but with a virtual attendee. So I could actually see a lot of the people sat at home could see what was going on behind the other party at the venue, increasing the networking engagement between the two groups. I think what would be nice is to have like set networking booths at the physical venue where people can randomly walk up and just have like a speed networking meeting with a virtual attendee, and maybe there's like a tannoy that one of the virtual attendees can speak through their microphone and signal out to somebody that's passing the booth, for example.
Yeah. Have you received yet any feedback, from those attendees and sponsors?
When we tried to bridge the gap between our virtual and hybrid attendees, but what we also had to try and do, given the safe distancing within our event in Singapore, we had to come up with a plan where in Singapore, although there was 160 people in the room, they couldn't network outside of their group of 40 people. And so we had to come up with a plan of how do we engage these groups of 40 people to engage each other. And so we leveraged an app called Hoover, which is a kind of event app, which people may or may not be familiar with. And what we eventually did was we uploaded all of the Singapore attendee list onto Hoover, and the Singapore attendee list could network for the 5 5 days between Monday and Friday on this event app. But then we also bring in our major sponsors and speakers from virtual, and we also uploaded them onto the Hoover app for the 5 days. And so we tried to combine both the virtual and the physical world through this online app. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't the success we hoped it was, because I don't think we put in the right plan to educate and promote exactly the benefit of this kind of umbrella technology. It does have legs, but it's quite difficult to implement. It's another thing for people to remember and do.
We can talk about hybrid, but we've got this element that's separate, which is blended. Now, do you want to blend both of your audiences? That's different from a hybrid event. And I think you can blend, have virtual attendees ask a live speaker a question. It's very simple to do. But really, do we need to go down the line of having people who are at the physical event networking for the people who are at the virtual event? That's something I'd really like to see us develop into next year, because I don't necessarily think that's something that we have to do. How much more expensive is it to run this kind of double event, this blended event? Could Mike, Ross, could you give me an idea of where you were in terms of expense as you put these hybrid events on?
Yeah, so in terms of, compared to the traditional purely physical event, the only real, obviously there was some support work that went into graphics and, preparation for the virtual platform. And then there's obviously the virtual platform fees, but it's not a huge increase on the spend that you would typically spend on a physical event. So this is why I'm certain that every event organizer worth their salt will look to do hybrid events or blended events going into next year, because from my perspective, the cost outlay more than justifies the added value of having such a wider reach.
So we did a high production cost on our Hopin platform. So we were, there's a lot of money spent on video editing and also the AV crew for that. When we did switch it into Singapore, I would probably say our costs are at least 50% higher than a normal live event. It doesn't make sense with a small event. I'm not going to lie. The costs for a small live event to go hybrid, with a big TV crew and filming it just wouldn't work. I mean, that's, you can make a decent amount of money off virtual, you can make a decent amount of money off live. To try and hybridize a small event, I don't get the point of it anymore. I mean, I think for us, Mike's got a scale, he's got 1,000 people. I think we have to get to an event with at least 1,000 people to try and make it worthy of having something that's truly hybrid.
We've been running hybrid events for 3 or 4 years, and it was before pandemic when we were doing it, but we were only spending about an extra £3,000 to put the live feed onto a platform with Slido, some engagement. We were recording the content anyway, so there wasn't that much extra. And I'm thinking, again, when we do hybrid, it's a similar feed. You just put it on something like Hopin and it's not that much more expensive. And that was for around about 300-400. So I definitely think you can do it for a smaller fee. It's just like anything, how much do you want to spend in terms of production? But this blended idea, if someone would have said, yeah, but I want my attendees virtually to network with my physical attendees, then I might have just said, well, we don't have the expense for that. It's different in terms of where you go. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to think about. Were you really able to concentrate on that kind of customer experience? And did you feel that the customer experience for your virtual event was the same or better or worse than it was for the physical attendee? Or was it just something that you're never ever going to be able to get close to?
We had we used to do Hopin only events, only virtual events. The whole team were there, and it was quite engaging. The whole team was engaging with all of our audience. This week we had all of our team bar one person at the physical event, and so we had one person on Hopin for the whole day, and so they were the only person that was engaging the whole audience. And he's my brother, and so my brother basically said it felt very strange because every second comment in the comment box was him, because he was trying to reply back to every single person, and so it did take away from the customer journey, because I think you've really got to have an army dedicated to your virtual event in the same way that you've got to have well, not an army, but a relatively good team dedicated so that you can have different perspectives and a bit of banter and But, we were too light on the virtual because we were spread too thin. So I think we maybe neglected our virtual component this week.
Yeah, also very similar to what Ross has just said. It was we had two of our team who were dedicated to the hop-in event, but it wasn't so much that we weren't managing the the CX during the event. It was more, I got the impression that a lot of the virtual attendees they had the feeling of missing out. They could they could see the feed from the live venue, and obviously when they were taking part in the virtual networking meetings, they could see the whole event going on behind the other party's back. So I do know from speaking with Hopin, the hybrid tools that they're developing at the moment and should be released early next year are going to go a long way to solve a lot of those problems. So we're actually very excited to be using the new hybrid networking tools for our event next March with Hopin. So
brilliant. No, that would be really good. I'd like to have a look at those. Iris, thinking about your almost hybrid event, which took place in September, and I hope, Edward, this kind of partly answers your question, but really, Iris, if you would have had people in Reykjavik, how much better experience would it been for those people who were in Reykjavik compared to the people who were watching online? I mean, it's almost night and day, isn't it? Thinking about showing them the city and taking them from food.
Yeah,
Can we even
yeah.
compare that?
It's definitely a challenge. I mean, those attending virtual events today have extremely high expectation, and in order for us to success, we need to fill this expectation. I mean, we can't forget that all of us have been pushed into this virtual direction, whether we like it or not, due to COVID. But saying that, these changes are also opportunity for us, and we need to embrace the changes. But I totally can feel the difficulty in having a team focusing on the virtual and then another team focusing on the physical, and meeting all those expectations. It's tough. And I know Hopin platform, we've used it for events here in Iceland, but we choose another we were using Feedloop for our virtual event. And I know that, I mean, there's so many changes every single week. I mean, there are releases to these platforms. So when we go hybrid in October, we will probably have a solution to many of those problems we were facing today. So I think we need to be awake and aware of what is happening, because the technique is moving so fast, and the key is also to understand those that are attending the conference. There's just so many challenges. But
yeah, I mean, I think to answer Edward's point, I think you can try and have a good customer experience virtually and physical, but the value proposition has to be very different. And you can concentrate on people enjoying what they've chosen. But Ross, as you said, the value proposition for live at $499 has got to be different than 99 to 199 virtually. It's got to be a different value proposition. And I think we just have to look at our audience and say they have chosen to join us virtually, so they're happy with the value proposition that we're delivering. We just have to give them a good experience. And it's the same for physical. I don't think we should go down that route of comparing physical to virtual in terms of the value proposition. I think we've just got to concentrate on making it as good as possible for our attendees. But for me, the choice is the most important thing. Allow people the choice to come to the event, different value proposition, or engage virtually, different value proposition, and delivering on that. And the same for sponsors as well.
Yeah, understand their expectations in order to be able to deliver to them what they want. So those that are coming to Reykjavik, they expect other things than those that are on the virtual.
We're about to announce our next event next week, so I can show you just for some feedback on how we're structuring the different ticket classes between the virtual attendees and the physical. Yeah, and so these prices aren't indicative, but they'll be going up as it gets closer to the event. But I'm just sharing this with you more so that you can see how we're looking to have the different tiers of attendance, So, and that's, we've got obviously a number of different type of tickets. So each one will have, different options. So.
Great. Just look again, Mike. It looks like you're round about that 2.5 times figure that it says like both Ross and I stumbled upon, and we suggested to Iris when I was helping her with her hybrid event. But that seems to be quite a comfortable. I wonder if that's the natural figure that we're kind of landing on across the industry. Is that there's got to be value for a physical event. It's got to be different from virtual, but there's got to be a clear value proposition for both of them.
Yeah, and I think really you've got to think about your sponsors' capital value as well from the event, and when you can legitimately cover any overheads for a virtual attendee, you can literally price the ticket, with a 5% margin or even lower, and it's never going to hurt the event because as long as you've covered your costs and you're just driving more numbers to the event, which all of the sponsors, of course, love.
Quick question, Mike, if I don't mind interrupting. When you got ticket prices, at 7, 20, 30 euros, how much effort are you putting into giving that virtual attendee an experience? Because the expectations should be quite low at that price point. So what are you trying to really deliver them on the day? Because, when I'm trying to deliver a virtual attendee to get a 199 ticket, or I know there's people that are having virtual tickets at 499, there seems to be a lot of pressure into what you got to give the attendee for that 499. Like, what are you trying to give them for that price point?
So really, we've got, for the next event, we've chosen sort of 3 different virtual tiers. The basic tier and the lowest price point is purely access to the stages, the expo sessions, without any networking. Next price point up, we throw in the networking element so they can actually meet with other delegates. And then the highest bracket on the virtual side is where we have a dedicated stage and we have a 10-minute presentation slot, and the price is reflective of that added benefit. And we throw in after recordings from their presentation, branded recordings, etc., etc.
I think that's a really good question, Ross. And if it's a rhetorical one, how much effort do you put in for a ticket price that's not going to make you the revenue that you were making at the physical event? I think it's something that we're really going to think about as we move into this hybrid world, for sure.
I've been looking into, I like the freemium model, where you have you have free, some access is free, and then premium prices.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not sure I agree there because I have a friend who has an events business, and they had a very large event of around 10,000 people registered, and there was a large segment were freemium access, and there was only 2/3 attendance. When all said and done in the post event analysis. So it's a real double-edged sword, I believe, when you go down the freemium model for at least for large numbers of the audience.
Yeah, it of course, yeah, I agree, but then it depends on what you deliver in the free range. It could be simply a teaser that you can play with.
It's all about the objectives. If increasing the amount of people who are seeing the content, who are then thinking, well, next year I'm definitely going to pay $99 to see more of that, or $399 to go to the event. It's that free content has always had a place in physical and virtual events. We've always been tweeting stuff out or live streaming sessions and things. So it's definitely part of the mix, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, personally, I would never offer it. It's not going to. We don't think you ever get the right customer from a freemium model. We want people who are going to pay money, and then we want them to upsell into a second price tier. And I think going from 10 to 20 is okay, but going from 0 to 10 is very hard. And so we don't want to start on 0. We want to start on $10 and get a customer to buy $20 next time. That's what we want for our customer base.
Yeah, and just to clarify my point, I think freemium is fine if you can if you're sure that they're going to attend. So we indeed in October we had freemium access online for the startups, but we were certain they'd attend because they were all there for their reasons of either finding an investor or finding customers. So we didn't see a large drop off between registrations and attendance. But I think in some sectors and industries, there's a real drop off between those that indicate interest and those that don't turn up.
Yeah, an interesting point for me to finish on. I've been running a few events which are kind of campaigning events, not for profit events. And what we've been doing is offering access to the events for free, but allowing people to donate. And I've run 3 of these events now for 3 different organizations. And at the end of it, I'm always kind of thinking, wow, I'm so surprised that so many people have just donated for this. And I think as we go on, you never know. This might become, depending on the sector, a bit more of the model, that people who don't want to pay, and then other people who are really happy to pay. But I said, I've been, to 20-25% of people who've been watching have just been no other access or anything. They've just wanted to contribute towards it, which is, really encouraging. So Mike, Ross, Iris, thanks very much for joining us.